Practicing arpeggio positions is a huge waste of time. This single, boring scale exercise connects your chords, scales, and arpeggios. It's really all you need. And once that clicked for me in a Barry Harris masterclass, jazz soloing made so much more sense. So in this video, I'm going to show you the exercise and how it directly maps arpeggios to scales so that you can just see licks on the fretboard and stop wasting time on full arpeggio positions. One of the hardest things about jazz soloing isn't the technique. It's that everything you practice separately has to come together in real time. And if you're practicing the way most teachers show you, you're actually making that harder. Most teachers will tell you to learn full arpeggio positions. And the problem is that when you get to an actual solo, you now have even more to juggle. Chords, scales, arpeggios, rhythm, phrasing, and none of it really feels connected. But here's what it actually looks like when it works. Notice what's happening here. So I'm using arpeggios, but those aren't full positions. They're all 1 octave arpeggios over each chord. And that's not just in my solos, that's how arpeggios show up in jazz solos across the board. Look at this Charlie Parker solo. 1 octave arpeggios starting from the root all over the place. So practicing full arpeggio positions isn't just inefficient, it's practicing something that doesn't fit with how arpeggios are actually used in a solo. Now there's a place for the full positions later, but if you want your lines to sound like jazz, you really need to start somewhere else. Barry Harris understood this, and here's the exercise that he taught me. In a masterclass in The Hague, he told us, play a major scale from C to C. Simple enough, and then he said, for each note in the scale, play the 7th chord arpeggio starting from that note. That's the exercise, and it looks simple, but look at what you're actually doing. You're practicing the scale, learning all the diatonic arpeggios, and getting all the diatonic chords of the scale, all at the same time. So 1 exercise instead of a scale and 7 separate arpeggio positions. And that's just the beginning. As you already saw in that Charlie Parker solo, this is exactly what you need for your solos to sound like real jazz. When Barry Harris showed us this, I could see that it made sense, but it didn't fully click yet. But that came a few minutes later, and it changed how I thought about soloing completely. First, let me show you the easiest way to actually learn this exercise. Here's the easiest way to build up the full exercise. Start with the scale on its own. Now play the same scale but in thirds, so for each note you add the note 2 notes above. And once that feels comfortable, stack 2 of those thirds together on each note and you get all the diatonic triads, which is also a very useful thing to know. And finally you add 1 more third on top of each triad, and now you have the full exercise, the diatonic 7th chord arpeggios through the scale. Each of these steps is small enough that you can get comfortable before moving to the next one, and once you can play the full exercise, you're not just running a drill, you're seeing the scale, the chords, and the arpeggios connected in one place on the fretboard. Now if you want to work through this away from the video, I made a free PDF with all the steps so that you can practice it at your own pace. There's a link in the description. Now that's the exercise. Now let me show you just how powerful this really is when you put it to use. When it really clicked for me was when Barry gave us the next exercise, because this is where you go from just running an exercise to actually playing jazz. He told us to put half step before each arpeggio and play the arpeggio as a triplet. Now for the C major 7, that gives you this. Now take that same lick through the whole scale. That small tweak turns the exercise into 7 bebop licks, 1 for every chord in the scale, and actually more, but we'll get to that. The moment I played that, I knew I'd been wasting time on the arpeggio positions. This was a direct line to sounding like jazz, something I immediately recognized from the solos that I've been checking out. It's not just an exercise, you can hear this exact approach in the Charlie Parker solo. Here it is on the F major 7 chord. And that's it. That's the exercise you've been practicing showing up in a famous jazz solo. Now, if you enjoy videos on jazz like this one, then subscribe to the channel. I publish new videos on jazz guitar every week. Let's move on to the other reason this exercise will change how you solo. So far, you've seen the exercise and how it connects directly to real jazz solos, but Here's where it gets even more useful, because the diatonic arpeggios don't just give you one option per chord, they give you a lot more. Now, you already heard me use it at the beginning of the video. Most players think about soloing like this. I'm on a D minor 7, so I play a D minor 7 arpeggio. And that's the one-to-one thinking that really limits you. But look at what the diatonic arpeggios actually show you. For D minor 7, now the third of the chord is F. And if you look at the diatonic arpeggio starting on F, that's an F major 7. And of course, it's mostly the same notes. So that of course sounds good. And then you're adding the E, the ninth, on top of the chord, which is just a beautiful color. And another option would be to start on the fifth of the chord, so the A. And here you have an A minor 7. All good notes on the chord and a really beautiful melody, especially if you use it to really frame the third of the D minor 7, the F. And the same logic works on G7. The arpeggio from the third gives you a B half diminished, and from the fifth you get a D minor 7. Both strong options. At the beginning of the video I was using the A minor 7 arpeggio over D minor 7 and the B half diminished arpeggio over the G7. And you can now start composing licks with these and the other options. So here's an example using the two other arpeggios over D minor 7 and G7. It borrows the chromatic phrase from the Charlie Parker solo as well. And that is how you start building a real jazz vocabulary, composing lines and turning these arpeggios into licks that sound like jazz. Now, if you want to take this further and actually apply it to a real jazz standard, my Jazz Guitar Roadmap course does exactly that. You learn to take these kinds of building blocks and use them in your own real jazz solos on a song. Over 7,005 students have been through it, and there's a link in the description if you want to join them. So that's the exercise. One scale, all the diatonic arpeggios, all the diatonic chords, and a direct connection to the licks and lines that you actually want to play in your solos. Now, most players skip this because it looks boring, but now you can see what it actually gives you, and that's why it's worth more than hours of practicing full arpeggio positions. Start with a scale in diatonic arpeggios, get comfortable with it, and use it to play solos that actually sound like jazz. There is a similar triad exercise that is incredibly simple and might feel boring, but it's the key to nailing the jazz sound in your solos. Pro jazz players obsess over it for that same reason, but most players ignore it and don't realize what they're missing. Check it out, learn jazz, make music.